Hello, my name is Tony. After the popular financial success of The Dirty Dozen, director Robert Aldrich developed an uncanny knack of making commercially unsuccessful films that very often weren't very well received critically either. Something of an anomaly because they were some of the best and often most fearlessly daring mainstream movies ever produced. Which is easy for me to say because they happen to number among some of my most favoured motion pictures of all time, and I relate to them instinctively. Just that audiences of the time didn't agree with me, strange that, which doesn't bother me, and didn't seem to bother Aldrich a lot, who made the films he wanted to make in the way he wanted to make them, to the extent of forming his own studio at one point. I've covered the man in more depth in other reviews on the channel, so I'm not going to repeat myself. Simply reaffirm he was a single-minded maverick with a similar macho mindset to Ernest Hemingway and Sam Peckinpah, and possessed a red-blooded creative genius. He was a man of vision, and he saw his visions through to fruition. Would today's younger audiences regard him any differently? I don't know, but judging by the mental state of most of today's younger audiences, I sincerely fucking doubt it. I must allow that there are some rare exceptions who are wonderfully clued in individuals, and since starting this channel, it's been my privilege to meet some of them. Hey Street! But generally they are pretty fucking rare, which I'm sure they're aware of. Frequent flyers will already know where I saw this film first and roundabout when. So, without further ado, synopsis-wise, Ulzana, Joaquin Martinez, a Chiricahua Apache, breaks free of the San Carlos Reservation in Arizona Territory and leads a raiding party on a killing spree. The territorial harbingers of law and order, the US cavalry at Fort Lowell, need to take action to protect the local European settlers and curtail Ulzana's murderous activities ASAP. To this end, the fort commander, Major Cartwright Douglas Watson, sends riders out to alert the settlers. One is cornered and killed by Ulzana's braves. Ulzana catches up with the other, who is escorting a mother and young son back to the fort. The trooper shoots the mother in the head to spare her rape and torture at the hands of the braves. As he tries to escape with the son, his horse is brought down. Rather than be captured, he blows his own brains out. The braves gut his corpse and play catch with his liver. Guess there wasn't much in the way of sports entertainment in the old frontier. Cartwright sends out a patrol led by Lieutenant Debuin, Bruce Davison, a greenhorn 6 months out of the military academy and son of a Christian minister. The objective is to apprehend or eliminate Ulzana and his raiding party. Accompanying Debuin is McIntosh, Burt Lancaster, a veteran army scout, his Apache friend and ace tracker Kinete, George Luke, and seasoned cavalry sergeant Richard Jekyll. Aldrich evolves the film into a pursuit thriller and in typical style doesn't shy away from framing the action in the most grim and grisly of ways. A homesteader is found tortured and tied to a tree, castrated, a fire lit in his groin, his dog's tail stuffed into his mouth. Another homesteader is discovered lashed upside down to a fence, a fire having been lit under his head. His wife, Mrs. Reardon, Dran Hamilton, has been beaten and gang raped and tied to a wagon, left alive to induce Debuin to split his force and escort her back to the fort. McIntosh must think fast to develop strategies and outmaneuver Ulzana, who always seems to be several steps ahead. Eventually he and Debuin formulate a risky plan whereby a ruse will draw Ulzana into attacking half the force under McIntosh and the sergeant, whilst Debuin will race to the rescue in the nick of time. Will it work? Does the cavalry arrive? Well, not without a lot of bloodshed, casualties and death, because Debuin is a bit of a mindless, inexperienced wanker with a brain-bending lack of common sense, to be fair. Ulzana's raid was somewhat surprisingly well received by critics of the time. I found myself at a loss to explain why when they didn't seem to rate other Aldrich flicks from that period, like Too Late the Hero or Emperor of the North, which were terrific films, but they liked Ulzana's raid. Go figure. Then, oh, of course, realization dawned that would be it. They obviously saw it as an allegorical critique of the conduct of the US government and military in the increasingly unpopular Vietnam War. Yeah, that would explain its appeal to those elites with a leftist liberal ideology, one most film critics back then seemed to share. And indeed, when you study the film, those parallels are clearly there. You have the US Army pitted against a comparatively smaller and underpowered enemy it does not understand. understand, an enemy that engages terrorism and guerrilla tactics with its own rules and strategies to wage war on its own terms, an enemy whose unrepentant savagery bleeds through to the US soldiers, who begin to mimic it, causing the audience to question exactly who's got right on their side here. And it's valid, relevant stuff, intriguing political commentary cleverly woven into the fabric of the narrative, which doesn't mean Aldrich's directorial style or the content and tone of Alan Sharp's bruising script is any less macho, violently explicit and brutally provocative in ways that usually brought the director adverse criticism for being gratuitous from the same quarters. Maybe violent machismo is a sweeter pill to swallow if it comes with a message attached to massage the bristling sensibilities of the critical elite. Me, I like violent machismo in movies, message or no message. Making a point can be a stimulating enhancement, as it is here, as it was in The Searchers, but like Ford's classic, Ulzana's Raid would be a great western regardless, because it's a great film with a great script, great director and great actors doing great things. Burt Lancaster is on superb form as Macintosh. His character has a Native American wife and understands the Apache better than most. He's world-weary and hardened to the atrocity he witnesses, having been exposed to it routinely over time. Unlike Debuin, whose short-lived notions of Christian charity soon morph into revulsion, incomprehension and hatred. Somewhat the standard ugly American then, full of sanctimony but automatically mistrustful of the stoic tracker Kinete, not realizing that his word once given sets his loyalty to Macintosh and the army in stone. How can a savage have principles? He don't get it. Bruce Davison is perfectly cast as a callow idealist trying to cling to vestiges of humanity and dignity when his own intrinsic dogma and bigotry challenge and cloud his judgment and pragmatism. When his own men defile the corpse of Ulzana's son whom Macintosh has killed, he takes them to task. The older man points out,
"What bothers you, Lieutenant, is you don't like to think of white men behaving like Indians. Kind of confuses the issue, don't it?"
There is solid support from Richard Jekyll, who was one of the best supporting character actors in the business, and additionally George Luke and Joaquin Martinez, who are both suitably imposing and noble granite-hewn mythological figures. The screenplay by Alan Sharp mirrors his surname, razor-honed, philosophical and right on target. Sharp would go on to write the script for the excellent Arthur Penn, Gene Hackman, neo-noir private dick flick Night Moves, and the truly fucking abysmal Damnation Alley. I'll forgive him Damnation Alley because Ulzana's Raid is so good, some of his very best work. Originally he intended it to be a homage to John Ford, or so he said. It dispenses with Ford's sentimentality and Old West romanticism from the outset, but in certain respects does reflect some of the darker elements in The Searchers. Aldrich's direction is commanding with a tight grip on all aspects. The lines between good guys and bad guys are very blurry indeed. He doesn't spare anyone. He's not noticeably or disproportionately sympathetic to the whites or the Indians. He just composes the stark and violent events, the confrontations, the action, and lets it play out with no specific judgment bestowed on either side. Macintosh is there to do a job, debuting his inexperience with misplaced ideas of moral superiority. Ulzana is reacting towards the maltreatment of his people on the reservation with unbridled savagery and primal disregard for human life. It's a film of extremes, both behavioural and reactive, but the audience can see both sides of the equation. Rooting for either is a choice. Being a white heterosexual male, I back Team Lancaster. If I were a heterosexual Native American male, my loyalties might fall elsewhere and I'd possibly back Team Martinez. Now if I were a self-righteous liberal SJW bleeding heart elitist, well I'm not, and it's so alien to me I couldn't say. I can only imagine and theorise, as you well might. There is splendid cinematography from veteran Joseph F. Byrock, and the landscapes and wastelands are captured with a bright and harsh vivacity. Frank Duvall, Aldrich's go-to composer, submits an ironically jaunty military-flavoured soundtrack to accompany the action. It's a nice counterpoint to the nihilistic themes of the film and their unflinching depiction. Quentin Tarantino thinks it's Aldrich's best film of the 70s, and it might well be. Where repeated viewings of his output are concerned, I've only watched The Dirty Dirty Dozen and Too Late the Hero more times. That might be just down to circumstances and opportunity. I am frequently drawn back to it time and again though, because it succeeds in sparking the target on multiple levels, as a western, a pursuit thriller, a war movie, and as a socio-political allegory. It's another essential Robert Aldrich film, as most of them, I've come to realise, invariably are. Thanks for your time and attention and your astoundingly kind, tolerant and continued support. I was recently thinking about trying to be less abrasive and more user-friendly towards people. After due consideration and some periods of deep contemplation lasting for at least, 3 seconds, I thought, fuck it, why should I? Don't like it? Don't watch. If you do like it, however, then welcome to Team Tony. Make yourself at home. How's that for engagement? Soon, pilgrims.